A simple quiz, it's more than just a test of what you know, right? Sometimes it can actually be a really fascinating map of a huge subject. It can show you all these different layers of knowledge, from stuff pretty much everyone knows, all the way to the tiny details only an expert would catch. And today, we're going to use a book of Bible trivia to explore that very idea, how we learn, and all the different levels of what it really means to know something. All right, so let's just dive right in with a question that, for a lot of us, is probably as familiar as a fairy tale. I'm willing to bet that most of you already have the answer ready to go. This is our ground floor. And yup, there it is, the Garden of Eden. This is what we can call level 1 knowledge. It's a fact that's so well known, it's basically woven into our culture. You see it in art, in literature, you even hear it in everyday sayings. The thing is, you don't really have to have read the book to know the answer. So let's think about this like we're building a pyramid of knowledge. This first level, the base, it's built on these huge, iconic stories that a ton of us just sort of absorb by being alive. Let's do a few more, kind of a rapid fire round. Here's another absolute classic, the story of the prophet who really didn't want his job. And I bet you already know the big, fishy detail of what happened next. Of course, he was swallowed by a great fish. It's such a memorable image, and that's the part of the story that really sticks with people. It's the headline. Okay, now this next one is interesting because it's a specific number. And it's funny how certain numbers from these stories can become almost famous in their own right. Think you know this one? 40. That number, 40, shows up a lot, but this is its most famous appearance, right here in the story of Noah's Ark. It's a detail that has become totally inseparable from the narrative. And for our last question on this level, we've got the ultimate underdog story. I mean, this story gets used as a metaphor for just about every unlikely victory you can imagine. In sports, in business, you name it. It's gone way beyond its original context. With a stone from his sling. It's simple, it's iconic, and it's incredibly powerful. So you can see this first layer of knowledge is really all about being familiar with the big picture, the major plot points. But what does it take to start climbing that pyramid? So here's where we make the jump. We're moving from this general cultural awareness, just kind of knowing the stories, to a much more specific, direct knowledge. To get to this next level of the pyramid, you've probably had to actually sit down and engage with the text itself. Welcome to level 2. To answer these questions, you need to have done a bit more than just hear the big stories on the evening news. You've probably read some of the text, paid attention in a class, or maybe did some studying on your own. The details start to get a lot finer here. Okay, so for example, pretty much everyone has heard of the 10 Commandments. But this question, this asks for a specific physical detail. It's a step beyond just knowing they exist. 2 tables of stone. It's a simple fact, right? But it's one that requires a little more than just soaking it up from the culture. It's a detail you'd pick up from a closer reading of the story of Moses up on Mount Sinai. Now, here's a different kind of level 2 question. This one isn't about the plot of a story. It's about the meaning of a specific, very important word that's used in the text. God with us. See, to know this, you need to understand not just the narrative, but some of the language and the core ideas being presented. It's a clear step up in complexity. And here's one more example of that deeper knowledge. A pretty common trivia question for this level is, how many books are in the Protestant Bible? The answer is 66. This is what you'd call a meta question. It's not about a character or an event, it's about the structure of the text itself. Knowing this is like looking at the blueprints of the book. All right, we've covered the cultural cornerstones. We've taken a deeper dive, but there is one level left. So brace yourselves, because we're heading for the very peak of the pyramid. Okay, this is the expert level. This is for the truly dedicated, the scholars, the historians, the people who have made this a lifelong study. The questions up here are testing your knowledge of details that are so specific, so granular, that most people would just read right past them without a second thought. Just take this one for example. I mean, come on, this is not part of some grand, sweeping story. It is a very specific, almost random detail that's mentioned about a pretty obscure character. Any guesses? Og, the king of Bashan. Now be honest, did you get that one? This kind of trivia is amazing because it shows you the sheer vastness of the information packed into this text. It's a huge library of history, law, poetry, and prophecy, and it's filled with countless little details, right down to the dimensions of a giant king's bed. So after that climb all the way from the Garden of Eden to King Og's giant bed, What's the big takeaway? Why does breaking down knowledge into these different levels even matter? Well, because this pyramid isn't just a test, it's actually a map for learning, for learning anything. You start with what's familiar, right? The big stories that give you a cultural hook. Then you can move from just being passively aware to having active knowledge by digging into the details. And finally, you get to this place where you can really appreciate the true complexity and depth of the whole subject. And you know what's really cool? This isn't just my interpretation. The creators of our source material, this trivia book, they actually designed it with this exact structure in mind. They say so right in the book. They wanted to create a path for the reader to follow, from the simple to the really complex, to encourage a deeper and deeper look. In the end, this whole layered approach, it applies to everything. Seriously, think about your favorite hobby, or your job, or a sport you love. There's the stuff everybody knows, then there's the stuff the real fans know, and then there's the stuff only the true experts know. So the next time you come across a quiz, don't just see it as a test. See it as a map of knowledge, and ask yourself, how far up the pyramid do you want to climb?